Can perfect manners mask a murderer? In Victorian London, Charles Dickens crafted a tale of calculated evil, lurking behind a respectable smile. A gentleman whose perfectly groomed appearance and cultured conversation conceals something far more sinister. In the gaslit streets and elegant drawing rooms, a deadly game unfolds. Someone watches from the shadows, but nothing is quite what it seems. My name is Tony Walker. Welcome to the Classic Detective Stories podcast. Join me for Dickens's only pure detective story, where appearances can be fatally deceptive. Hunted Down by Charles Dickens. 1. Most of us see some romances in life. In my capacity of chief manager of a life assurance office, I think I have within the last 30 years seen more romances than the generality of men, however unpromising the opportunity may at first sight seem. As I have retired and live at my ease, I possess the means that I used to want of considering what I have seen at leisure. My experiences have a more remarkable aspect so reviewed than they had when they were in progress. I have come home from the play now, and can recall the scenes of the drama upon which the curtain has fallen, free from the glare, bewilderment, and bustle of the theatre. Let me recall one of those romances of the real world. There's nothing truer than physiognomy taken in connection with manner. The art of reading that book of which eternal wisdom obliges every human creature to present his or her own page with the individual character written on it is a difficult one, perhaps, and is little studied. It may require some natural aptitude, and it must require, for everything does, some patience and some pains. That these are not usually given to it, that numbers of people accept a few stock, commonplace expressions of the face as the whole list of characteristics, and neither seek nor know the refinements that are truest, that you, for instance, give a great deal of time and attention to the reading of music, Greek, Latin, French, Italian, Hebrew, if you please, and do not qualify yourself to read the face of the master or mistress looking over your shoulder teaching it to you. I assume to be 500 times more probable than improbable. Perhaps a little self-sufficiency may be at the bottom of this. Facial expression requires no study from you, you think. It comes by nature to you, to know enough about it, and you are not to be taken in. I confess, for my part, that I have been taken in, over and over again. I have been taken in by acquaintances, and I have been taken in, of course, by friends. Far oftener by friends than by any other class of persons. How came I to be so deceived? Had I quite misread their faces? No, believe me, my first impression of these people, founded on face and manner alone, was invariably true. My mistake was in suffering them to come nearer to me and explain themselves away. 2. The partition which separated my own office from our general outer office in the city was of thick plate glass. I could see through it what passed in the outer office without hearing a word. I had it put up in place of a wall that had been there for years, ever since the house was built. It is no matter whether I did or did not make the change in order that I might derive my first impressions of strangers who came to us on business from their faces alone, without being influenced by anything they said. Enough to mention that I turned my glass partition to that account, and that a life assurance office is at all times exposed to be practiced upon by the most crafty and cruel of the human race. It was through my glass partition that I first saw the gentleman whose story I am going to tell. He'd come in without my observing it, and had put his hat and umbrella on the broad counter, and was bending over it to take some papers from one of the clerks. He was about 40 or so, dark, exceedingly well dressed in black, being in mourning, and the hand he extended, with a polite air, had a particularly well-fitting black kid glove upon it. His hair, which was elaborately brushed and oiled, was parted straight up the middle, and he presented this parting to the clerk exactly, to my thinking, as if he had said in so many words, "You must take me, if you please, my friend, just as I show myself. Come straight up here, follow the gravel path, keep off the grass, I allow no trespassing." I conceived a very great aversion to that man the moment I thus saw him. He had asked for some of our printed forms, and the clerk was giving them to him and explaining them. An obliged and agreeable smile was on his face, and his eyes met those of the clerk with a sprightly look. I have known a vast quantity of nonsense talked about bad men not looking you in the face. Don't trust that conventional idea. Dishonesty will stare honesty out of countenance any day in the week, if there's anything to be got by it. I saw in the corner of his eyelash that he became aware of my looking at him. Immediately he turned the parting in his hair toward the glass partition, as if he said to me with a sweet smile, "Straight up here, if you please, off the grass." In a few moments he had put on his hat and taken up his umbrella, and was gone. I beckoned the clerk into my room and asked, "Who was that?" He had the gentleman's card in his hand, Mr. Julius Slinkton, Middle Temple. "A barrister, Mr. Adams?" "I think not, sir." "I should have thought him a clergyman, but for his having no reverend here," said I. "Probably from his appearance," Mr. Adams replied, "he's reading for orders. I should mention that he wore a dainty white cravat and dainty linen altogether." "What did he want, Mr. Adams?" "Merely a form of proposal, sir, and a form of reference." "Recommended here, did he say?" "Yes, he said he was recommended here by a friend of yours. He noticed you, but said that as he had not the pleasure of your personal acquaintance, he would not trouble you." "Did he know my name?" "Oh, yes, sir. He said, 'There is Mr. Sampson, I see.'" "A well-spoken gentleman, apparently." "Remarkably so, sir." "Insinuating manners, apparently." "Very much so, indeed, sir." "Ha," said I. "I want nothing at present, Mr. Adams." Within a fortnight of that day, I went to dine with a friend of mine, a merchant, a man of taste who buys pictures and books, and the first man I saw among the company was Mr. Julius Slinkton. There he was, standing before the fire with good large eyes and an open expression of face, but still, I thought, requiring everybody to come at him by the prepared way he offered, and by no other. I noticed him ask my friend to introduce him to Mr. Sampson, and my friend did so. Mr. Slinkton was very happy to see me. Not too happy, here there was no overdoing of the matter, happy in a thoroughly well-bred, perfectly unmeaning way. "I thought you had met," our host observed. "No," said Mr. Slinkton. "I did look in at Mr. Sampson's office on your recommendation, but I really did not feel justified in troubling Mr. Sampson himself on a point in the everyday routine of an ordinary clerk." I said I should have been glad to show him any attention on our friend's introduction. "I'm sure of that," said he, "and am much obliged. At another time, perhaps, I may be less delicate. Only, however, if I have a real business, for I know, Mr. Sampson, how precious business time is, and what a vast number of impertinent people there are in the world." I acknowledged his consideration with a slight bow. "You were thinking," said I, "of affecting a policy on your life." "Oh dear, no. I'm afraid I'm not so prudent as you pay me the compliment of supposing me to be, Mr. Sampson. I merely inquired for a friend. But do you know what friends are in such matters? Nothing may ever come of it. I have the greatest reluctance to trouble men of business with inquiries for friends, knowing the probabilities to be 1,000 to 1 that the friends will never follow them up. People are so fickle, so selfish, so inconsiderate. Don't you in your business find them so every day, Mr. Sampson?" I was going to give a qualified answer, but he turned his smooth white parting on me with its "Straight up here, if you please," and I answered, "Yes." "I hear, Mr. Sampson," he resumed presently, for our friend had a new cook, and dinner was not so punctual as usual, "that your profession has recently suffered a great loss." "In money?" said I. He laughed at my ready association of loss with money and replied, "No, in talent and vigour." Not at once following out his allusion, I considered for a moment. "Has it sustained a loss of that kind?" said I. "I was not aware of it. Understand me, Mr. Sampson, I don't imagine that you have retired. It is not so bad as that, but Mr. Meltham—" "Oh, to be sure," said I. "Yes, Mr. Meltham, the young actuary of the inestimable—" "Just so," he returned in a consoling way. "He is a great loss. He was at once the most profound, the most original, and the most energetic man I have ever known connected with life assurance." I spoke strongly, for I had high esteem and admiration for Meltham, and my gentleman had indefinitely conveyed to me some suspicion that he wanted to sneer at him. He recalled me to my guard by presenting that trim pathway up his head with its infernal, "Not on the grass, if you please, the gravel." "You knew him, Mr. Slinkton?" "Only by reputation. To have known him as an acquaintance or as a friend is an honour I should have sought if he had remained in society, though I might never have had the good fortune to attain it, being a man of far inferior mark. He was scarcely above 30, I suppose." "About 30. Ah," he sighed in his former consoling way. "What creatures we are, to break up, Mr. Sampson, and become incapable of business at that time of life. Any reason assigned for the melancholy fact?" Thought I, as I looked at him, "but I won't go up the track, and I will go on the grass." "What reason have you heard assigned, Mr. Slinkton?" I asked point blank. "Most likely a false one. You know what rumour is, Mr. Sampson?" "I never repeat what I hear. It is the only way of paring the nails and shaving the head of rumour. But when you ask me what reason I have heard assigned for Mr. Meltham's passing away from among men, it is another thing. I am not gratifying idle gossip then. I was told, Mr. Sampson, that Mr. Meltham had relinquished all his avocations and all his prospects because he was, in fact, broken-hearted, a disappointed attachment, I heard, though it hardly seems probable in the case of a man so distinguished and so attractive." "Attractions and distinctions are no arm against death," said I. "Oh, she died. Pray pardon me, I did not hear that. That indeed makes it very, very sad. Poor Mr. Meltham. She died. Ah, dear me. Lamentable, lamentable." I still thought his pity was not quite genuine, and I still suspected an unaccountable sneer under all this, until he said, as we were parted, like the other knots of talkers by the announcement of dinner, "Mr. Sampson, you are surprised to see me so moved on behalf of a man whom I have never known. I am not so disinterested as you may suppose. I have suffered, and recently, too, from death myself. I have lost one of two charming nieces who were my constant companions. She died young, barely 23, and even her remaining sister is far from strong. The world is a grave." He said this with deep feeling, and I felt reproached for the coldness of my manner. Coldness and distrust had been engendered in me, I knew, by my bad experiences. They were not natural to me, and I often thought how much I had lost in life, losing trustfulness, and how little I had gained, gaining hard caution, this state of mind being habitual to me. I troubled myself more about this conversation than I might have troubled myself about a greater matter. I listened to his talk at dinner, and observed how readily other men responded to it, and with what a graceful instinct he adapted his subjects to the knowledge and habits of those he talked with. As in talking with me he had easily started the subject I might be supposed to understand best and to be the most interested in, so in talking with others he guided himself by the same rule. The company was of a varied character, but he was not at fault as that I could discover with any member of it. He knew just as much of each man's pursuit as made him agreeable to that man in reference to it, and just as little as made it natural in him to seek modesty for information when the theme was broached. As he talked and talked, but really not too much, for the rest of us seemed to force it upon him, I became quite angry with myself. I took his face to pieces in my mind like a watch and examined it in detail. I could not say much against any of his features separately. I could say even less against them when they were put together. Then is it not monstrous, I asked myself, that because a man happens to part his hair straight up the middle of his head, I should permit myself to suspect and even to detest him? I may stop to remark that this was no proof of my sense. An observer of men who finds himself steadily repelled by some apparent trifling thing in a stranger is right to give it great weight. It may be the clue to the whole mystery. A hair or two will show where a lion is hidden. A very little key will open a very heavy door. I took my part in the conversation with him after a time, and we got on remarkably well. In the drawing-room, I asked the host how long he had known Mr. Slinkton. He answered, not many months. He had met him at the house of a celebrated painter then present, who had known him well when he was travelling with his nieces in Italy for their health. His plans in life being broken by the death of one of them, he was reading with the intention of going back to college as a matter of form, taking his degree and going into orders. I could not but argue with myself that here was the true explanation of his interest in poor Meltham, and that I had been almost brutal in my distrust on that simple head. 3. On the very next day but one, I was sitting behind my glass partition as before, when he came into the outer office as before. The moment I saw him again without hearing him, I hated him worse than ever. It was only for a moment that I had this opportunity, for he waved his tight-fitting black glove the instant I looked at him, and came straight in. "Mr. Sampson, good day. I presume you say upon your kind permission to intrude upon you. I don't keep my word in being justified by business, for my business here, if I may so abuse the word, is of the slightest nature." I asked, was it anything I could assist him in? "I thank you, no. I merely called to inquire outside whether my dilatory friend had been so false to himself as to be practical and sensible. But of course he's done nothing. I gave him your papers with my own hand, and he was hot upon the intention, but of course he has done nothing. Apart from the general human disinclination to do anything that ought to be done, I dare say there is a speciality about assuring one's life. You find it like will-making. People are so superstitious and take it for granted they will die soon afterwards. Up here, if you please, straight up here, Mr. Sampson, neither to the right nor to the left." I almost fancied I could hear him breathe the words as he sat smiling at me, with that intolerable parting, exactly opposite the bridge of my nose. "There is such a feeling sometimes, no doubt," I replied, "but I don't think it obtains to any great extent." "Well," said he, with a shrug and a smile, "I wish some good angel would influence my friend in the right direction. I rashly promised his mother and sister in Norfolk to see it done, and he promised him that he would do it. But I suppose he never will." He spoke for a minute or two on different topics and went away. I had scarcely unlocked the drawers of my writing table next morning when he reappeared. I noticed that he came straight to the door in the glass partition and did not pause a single moment outside. "Can you spare me 2 minutes, my dear Mr. Sampson?" By all means." "Much obliged." Laying his hat and umbrella on the table, I came earlier not to interrupt you. The fact is, I'm taken by surprise in reference to this proposal my friend has made." "Has he made one?" said I. "Yes," he answered, deliberately looking at me. And then a bright idea seemed to strike him. "Or he only tells me he has. Perhaps that might be a new way of evading the matter. By Jupiter, I never thought of that." Mr. Adams was opening the morning's letters in the outer office. "What's the name, Mr. Slinkton?" I asked. "Beckwith." I looked out at the door and requested Mr. Adams, if there were a proposal in that name, to bring it in. He had already laid it out of his hand on the counter. It was easily selected from the rest, and he gave it to me. "Alfred Beckwith. Proposal to effect a policy with us for £2,000, dated
yesterday. From the Middle Temple, I see, Mr. Slinkton. Yes, he lives on the same staircase with me. His door's opposite. I never thought he would make me his reference, though. It seems natural enough that he should. Quite so, Mr. Sampson, but I never thought it. Let me see. He took the printed paper from his pocket. How am I to answer all these questions? According to the truth, of course, said I. Oh, of course, he answered, looking up from the paper with a smile. I meant there were so many. But you do right to be particular. It stands to reason that you must be particular. Will you allow me to use your pen and ink? Certainly. And your desk? Certainly. He had been hovering about between his hat and his umbrella for a place to write on. He now sat down in my chair, at my blotting paper and inkstand, with the long walk up his head in accurate perspective before me, as I stood with my back to the fire. Before answering each question, he ran it over aloud and discussed it. How long had he known Mr. Alfred Beckwith? That he had to calculate by years upon his fingers. What were his habits? No difficulty about them, temperate in the last degree, and took a little too much exercise, if anything. All the answers were satisfactory. When he had written them all, he looked them over, and finally signed them in a very pretty hand. He supposed he had now done with the business. I told him he was not likely to be troubled any further. Should he leave the papers there, if he pleased? Much obliged. Good morning. I had one other visitor before him, not at the office, but at my own house. That visitor had come to my bedside when it was not yet daylight, and had been seen by no one else but my faithful, confidential servant. A second reference paper, for we required always two, was sent down into Norfolk, and was duly received back by post. This, likewise, was satisfactorily answered in every respect. Our forms were all complied with. We accepted the proposal, and the premium for 1 year was paid. 4. For 6 or 7 months I saw no more of Mr. Slinkton. He called once at my house, but I was not at home, and he once asked me to dine with him in the Temple, but I was engaged. His friend's assurance was effected in March. Late in September or early in October, I was down at Scarborough for a breath of sea air, where I met him on the beach. It was a hot evening. He came toward me with his hat in his hand, and there was the walk I felt so strongly disinclined to take in perfect order again, exactly in front of the bridge of my nose. He was not alone, but had a young lady on his arm. She was dressed in mourning, and I looked at her with great interest. She had the appearance of being extremely delicate, and her face was remarkably pale and melancholy, but she was very pretty. He introduced her as his niece, Miss Nina. "Are you strolling, Mr. Sampson? Is it possible you can be idle?" It was possible, and I was strolling. "Shall we stroll together?" "With pleasure." The young lady walked between us, and we walked on the cool sea sand in the direction of Filey. "There have been wheels here," said Mr. Slinkton, "and now I look again the wheels of a hand-carriage. Margaret, my love, your shadow, without doubt." "Miss Nina's shadow," I repeated, looking down at it on the sand. "Not that one," Mr. Slinkton returned, laughing. "Margaret, my dear, tell Mr. Sampson." "Indeed," said the young lady, turning to me, "there's nothing to tell, except that I constantly see the same invalid old gentleman at all times, wherever I go. I've mentioned it to my uncle, and he calls the gentleman my shadow." "Does he live in Scarborough?" I asked. "He's staying here." "Do you live in Scarborough?" "No, I'm staying here. My uncle has placed me with a family here for my health." "And your shadow?" said I, smiling. "My shadow," she answered, smiling too, "is, like myself, not very robust, I fear, for I lose my shadow sometimes, as my shadow loses me at other times. We both seem liable to confinement to the house. I have not seen my shadow for days and days, but it does oddly happen occasionally that wherever I go, for many days together, this gentleman goes. We have come together in the most unfrequented nooks on this shore." "Is this he?" said I, pointing before us. The wheels had swept down to the water's edge, and described a great loop on the sand in turning. Bringing the hoop back towards us and spinning it out as it came was a hand carriage drawn by a man. "Yes," said Miss Nina, "this really is my shadow, uncle." As the carriage approached us and we approached the carriage, I saw within it an old man, whose head was sunk on his breast, and who was enveloped in a variety of wrappers. He was drawn by a very quiet but very keen-looking man, with iron-grey hair, who was slightly lame. They had passed us when the carriage stopped, and the old gentleman, within, putting out his arm, called to me by my name. I went back and was absent from Mr. Slinkton and his niece for about 5 minutes. When I rejoined them, Mr. Slinkton was the first to speak. Indeed, he said to me in a raised voice before I came up with him, "It is well you have not been longer, or my niece might have died of curiosity to know who her shadow is, Mr. Sampson." "An old East India director," said I, "an intimate friend of our friends at whose house I first had the pleasure of meeting you. A certain Major Banks. You've heard of him?" "Never." "Very rich, Miss Nina, but very old and very crippled. An amiable man, sensible, much interested in you. He has just been expatiating on the affection that he has observed to exist between you and your uncle." Mr. Slinkton was holding his hat again, and he passed his hand up the straight walk, as if he himself went up it serenely after me. "Mr. Sampson," he said, tenderly pressing his niece's arm in his, "our affection was always a strong one, for we have had but few near ties. We have still fewer now. We have associations to bring us together that are not of this world, Margaret." "Dear uncle," murmured the young lady, and turned her face aside to hide her tears. "My niece and I have such remembrances and regrets in common, Mr. Sampson," he feelingly pursued, "that it would be strange indeed if the relations between us were cold or indifferent. If I remember a conversation we once had together, you will understand the reference I make. Cheer up, dear Margaret. Don't droop, my Margaret. I cannot bear to see you droop." The poor young lady was very much affected, but controlled herself. His feelings, too, were very acute. In a word, he found himself under such great need of a restorative that he presently went away to take a bath of sea-water, leaving the young lady and me sitting by a point of rock, and probably presuming, but that, you will say, was a pardonable indulgence in luxury, that she would praise him with all her heart. She did, poor thing. With all her confiding heart she praised him to me, for his care of her dead sister, and for his untiring devotion in her last illness. The sister had wasted away very slowly, and wild and terrible fantasies had come over her toward the end. But he had never been impatient with her, or at a loss, had always been gentle, watchful, and self-possessed. The sister had known him, as she had known him, to be the best of men, the kindest of men, and yet a man of such admirable strength of character as to be a very tower for the support of their weak natures while their poor lives endured. "I shall leave him, Mr. Sampson, very soon," said the young lady. "I know my life is drawing to an end, and when I am gone, I hope he will marry and be happy. I am sure he has lived single so long only for my sake, and for my poor sister's." The little hand carriage had made another great loop on the damp sand, and was coming back again, gradually spinning out a slim figure of 8 half a mile long. "Young lady," said I, looking around, laying my hand upon her arm, and speaking in a low voice, "time passes. You hear the gentle murmur of the sea." She looked at me with the utmost wonder and alarm, saying, "Yes." "And you know what a voice is in it when the storm comes?" "Yes." "You see how quiet and peaceful it lies before us, and you know what an awful sight of power without pity it might be this very night?" "Yes." "But if you had never heard or seen it, or heard of it in its cruelty, could you believe that it beats every inanimate thing in its way to pieces without mercy, and destroys life without remorse?" "You terrify me, sir, by these questions." "To save you, young lady, to save you. For God's sake, collect your strength and collect your firmness. If you were here alone and hemmed in by the rising tide on the floe to 50 feet above your head, you could not be in greater danger
Than the danger you are now to be saved from. The figure on the sand was spun out and straggled off into a crooked little jerk that ended at the cliff very near us. "As I am before heaven and the judge of all mankind, your friend, and your dead sister's friend, I solemnly entreat you, Miss Nina, without one moment's loss of time, to come to this gentleman with me." If the little carriage had been less near to us, I doubt if I could have got her away, but it was so near that we were there before she had recovered the hurry of being urged from the rock. I did not remain there with her 2 minutes. Certainly within 5 I had the inexpressible satisfaction of seeing her from the point we had sat on and to which I had returned, half supported and half carried up some rude steps notched in the cliff by the figure of an active man. With that figure beside her, I knew she was safe anywhere. I sat alone on the rock awaiting Mr. Slinkton's return. A twilight was deepening, and the shadows were heavy, when he came round the point with his hat hanging at his buttonhole, smoothing his wet hair with one of his hands, and picking out the old path with the other and a pocket-comb. "My niece is not here, Mr. Sampson," he said, looking about. "Miss Nina seemed to feel a chill in the air after the sun was down and has gone home." He looked surprised, as though she were not accustomed to do anything without him, even to originate so slight a proceeding. "I persuaded Miss Nina," I explained. "Ah," said he. "She is easily persuaded, for her good. Thank you, Mr. Sampson. She is better within doors. The bathing place was further than I thought, to say the truth. Miss Nina is very delicate," I observed. He shook his head and drew a deep sigh. "Very, very, very. You may recollect my saying so. The time that has since intervened has not strengthened her. The gloomy shadow that fell upon her sister so early in life seems, in my anxious eyes, to gather over her ever darker, ever darker. Dear Margaret, dear Margaret. But we must hope." The hand-carriage was spinning away before us at a most indecorous pace for an invalid vehicle, and was making most irregular curves upon the sand. Mr. Slinkton, noticing it after he had put his handkerchief up to his eyes, said, "If I may judge from appearances, your friend will be upset, Mr. Sampson." "It looks probable, certainly," said I. "The servant must be drunk." "The servants of old gentlemen will get drunk sometimes," said I. "The Major draws very light, Mr. Sampson." "The Major does draw light," said I. By this time the carriage, much to my relief, was lost in the darkness. We walked on for a little, side by side over the sand, in silence. After a short while he said, in a voice still affected by the emotion that his niece's state of health had awakened in him, "Do you stay here long, Mr. Sampson?" "Why, no, I'm going away tonight." "So soon? But business always holds you in request. Men like Mr. Sampson are too important to others to be spared to their own need of relaxation and enjoyment." "I don't know about that," said I. "However, I am going back." "To London?" "To London. I shall be there too, soon after you." I knew that as well as he did, but I did not tell him so. Any more than I told him what defensive weapon my right hand rested on in my pocket as I walked by his side, any more than I told him why I did not walk on the seaside of him, with the night closing in. We left the beach and our ways diverged. We exchanged good nights, and had parted indeed when he said, returning, "Mr. Sampson, may I ask, poor Meltham, whom we spoke of, dead yet?" "Not when I last heard of him, but too broken a man to live long, and hopelessly lost to his old calling. Dear, dear, dear," said he with great feeling, "sad, sad, sad. The world is a grave." And so went his way. It was not his fault if the world were not a grave, but I did not call that observation after him any more than I had mentioned those other things just now enumerated. He went his way, and I went mine with all expedition. This happened, as I have said, either at the end of September or the beginning of October. The next time I saw him, and the last time, was late in November. 5. I had a very particular engagement to breakfast in the Temple. It was a bitter northeasterly morning, and the sleet and slush lay inches deep in the streets. I could get no conveyance, and was soon wet to the knees, but I should have been true to that appointment, though I had to wade to it up to my neck in the same impediments. The appointment took me to some chambers in the Temple. They were at the top of a lonely corner house overlooking the river. The name Mr. Alfred Beckwith was painted on the outer door. On the door opposite, on the same landing, the name Mr. Julius Slinkton. The doors of both sets of chambers stood open, so that anything said aloud in one set could be heard in the other. I had never been in those chambers before. They were dismal, close, unwholesome, and oppressive. The furniture, originally good and not yet old, was faded and dirty. The rooms were in great disorder. There was a strong prevailing smell of opium, brandy, and tobacco. The grate and fire irons were splashed all over with unsightly blotches of rust, and on a sofa by the fire, in the room where breakfast had been prepared, lay the host, Mr. Beckwith, a man with all the appearances of the worst kind of drunkard, very far advanced upon his shameful way to death. "Slinkton's not come in yet," said this creature, staggering up when I went in. "Call him. Hello, Julius Caesar, go and drink." As he hoarsely roared this out, he beat the poker and tongs together in a mad way, as if that were his usual manner of summoning his associate. The voice of Mr. Slinkton was heard through the clatter from the opposite side of the staircase, and he came in. He had not expected the pleasure of meeting me. I have seen several artful men brought to a stand, but I never saw a man so aghast as he was when his eyes rested on mine. "Julius Caesar!" cried Beckwith, staggering between us. "Mist Sampson, Julius Caesar. Julius, Miss Sampson, is a friend of my soul. Julius keeps me plied with liquor morning, noon, and night. Julius is a real benefactor. Julius threw the tea and coffee out of the window when I used to have it here. Julius empties all the water jugs of their contents and flows them with spirits. Julius winds me up and keeps me gay. Boil a brandy, Julius." There was a rusty and furred saucepan in the ashes. The ashes looked like the accumulation of weeks, and Beckwith, rolling and staggering between us as if he were going to plunge headlong into the fire, got the saucepan out and tried to force it into Slinkton's hand. "Boil a brandy, Julius Caesar. Ah, come on, do your usual office. Boil brandy." He became so fierce in his gesticulations with the saucepan that I expected to see him lay open Slinkton's head with it. I therefore put out my hand to check him. He reeled back to the sofa and sat there panting, shaking and red-eyed, in his rags of dressing-gown, looking at us both. I noticed then that there was nothing to drink on the table but brandy, and nothing to eat but salted herrings and a hot, sickly, highly peppered stew. "At all events, sir, Mr. Sampson," said Slinkton, offering me the smooth gravel path for the last time, "I thank you for interfering between me and this unfortunate man's violence. However you came here, Mr. Sampson, or with whatever motive you came here, at least I thank you for that." "Boiler brandy," muttered Beckwith. Without gratifying his desire to know how I came there, I said quietly, "How's your niece, Mr. Slinkton?" He looked hard at me, and I looked hard at him. "I'm sorry to say, Mr. Sampson, that my niece has proved treacherous and ungrateful to her best friend. She left me without a word of notice or explanation. She was misled, no doubt, by some designing rascal. Perhaps you may have heard of it." "I did hear that she was misled by a designing rascal. In fact, I have proof of it." "Are you sure of that?" said he. "Quite. Boiler brandy," muttered Beckwith. "Company to breakfast, Julius Caesar. Do your usual office. Provide the usual breakfast, dinner, tea, and supper. Boiler to brandy." The eyes of Slinkton looked from him to me, and he said, after a moment's consideration, "Mr. Sampson, you are a man of the world, and so am I. I will be playing with you. "Oh, no, you won't," said I, shaking my head. "I tell you, sir, I will be plain with you, and I tell you, you will not," said I. "I know all about you. You plain with anyone? Nonsense. Nonsense. I plainly tell you, Mr. Sampson," he went on with a manner almost composed, "that I understand your object. You want to save your funds and to escape from your liabilities. These are old tricks of trade with you office gentlemen. But you will not do it, sir. You will not succeed. You have not an easy adversary to play against when you play against me. We shall have to inquire in due time when and how Mr. Beckwith fell into his present habits. With that remark, sir, I put this poor creature and his incoherent wanderings of speech aside, and wish you a good morning and a better case next time." While he was saying this, Beckwith had filled a half-pint glass with brandy. At this moment he threw the brandy at his face and threw the glass after it. Slinkton put his hands up half-blinded with the spirit and cut with the glass across the forehead. At the sound of the breakage, a fourth person came into the room, closed the door and stood at it. He was a very quiet, with very keen-looking man, with iron-grey hair, and slightly lame. Slinkton pulled out his handkerchief, assuaged the pain in his smarting eyes, and dabbled the blood on his forehead. He was a long time about it, and I saw that in the doing of it a tremendous change came over him, occasioned by the change in Beckwith, who ceased to pant and tremble, sat upright, and never took his eyes off him. I never in my life saw a face in which abhorrence and determination were so forcibly painted as in Beckwith's then. "Look at me, you villain," said Beckwith, "and see me as I really am. I took these rooms to make them a trap for you. I came into them as a drunkard to bait the trap for you. You fell into the trap, and you will never leave it alive. On the morning when you last went to Mr. Sampson's office, I had seen him first. Your plot has been known to both of us all along, and you have been counterplotted all along. What? Having been cajoled into putting that prize of £2,000 into your power, I was to be done to death with brandy, and brandy not proving quick enough with something quicker. Have I never seen you when you thought my senses gone, pouring from your little bottle into my glass? Why, you murderer and forger, alone here with you in the dead of night, as I have so often been. I've had my hand upon the trigger of a pistol 20 times to blow your brains out." This sudden starting up of the thing that he had supposed to be his imbecile victim into a determined man, with a settled resolution to hunt him down and be the death of him, mercilessly expressed from head to foot, was in the first shock too much for him. Without any figure of speech, he staggered under it. But there is no greater mistake than to suppose that a man who is a calculating criminal is, in any phase of his guilt, otherwise than true to himself and perfectly consistent with his whole character. Such a man commits murder, and murder is the natural culmination of his course. Such a man has to outface murder, and will do it with hardihood and effrontery. It is a sort of fashion to express surprise at any notorious criminal, having such crime upon his conscience, can so brave it out. Do you think that if he had it on his conscience at all, or had a conscience to have it upon, he could have ever committed the crime? Perfectly consistent with himself, as I believe all such monsters to be, this Slinkton recovered himself, and showed a defiance that was sufficiently cold and quiet. He was white, he was haggard, he was changed, but only as a sharper who had played for a great stake, and had been outwitted, and had lost the game. "Listen to me, you villain," said Beckwith, "and let every word you hear me say be a stab in your wicked heart. When I took these rooms to throw myself in your way, and lead you onto the scheme that I knew my appearance and supposed character and habits would suggest to such a devil, how did I know that? Because you were no stranger to me. I knew you well. and I knew you to be the cruel wretch who for such money had killed one innocent girl, while she trusted him implicitly, and who was by inches killing another. Slinkton took out a snuff-box, took a pinch of snuff, and laughed. "But see here," said Beckwith, never looking away, never raising his voice, never relaxing his face, never unclenching his hand. "See what a dull wolf you have been after all. The infatuated drunkard who never drank a 50th part of the liquor you plied him with, but poured it away, here, there, everywhere, almost before your eyes, who bought over the fellow you set to watch him, and to ply him by outbidding you at his bribe, before he had been at his work 3 days, with whom you have observed no caution, yet who was so bent on ridding the earth of you as a wild beast, that he would have defeated you if you had been ever so prudent. That drunkard whom you have many a time left on the floor of this room, and who has even let you go out of it alive and undeceived, when you have turned him over with your foot, has almost as often on the same night, within an hour, within a few minutes, watched you awake, had his hand at your pillow when you were asleep, turned over your papers, taken samples from your bottles and packets of powder, changed their contents, rifled every secret of your life. He had another pinch of snuff in his hand, but had gradually let it drop from between his fingers to the floor, where he now smoothed it out with his foot, looking down at it the while. That drunkard, said Beckwith, who had free access to your rooms at all times, that he might drink the strong drinks that you left in his way, and be the sooner ended, holding no more terms with you than he would hold with a tiger, has had his master key for all your locks, his tests for all your poisons, his clue to your cipher writing. He can tell you, as well as you can tell him, how long it took to complete that deed, what doses there were, what intervals, what signs of gradual decay upon mind and body, what distempered fancies were produced, what observable changes, what physical pain. He can tell you, as well as you can tell him, that all this was recorded day by day as a lesson of experience for future service. He can tell you better than you can tell him where that journal is at the moment. Slinkton stopped the action of his foot and looked at Beckwith. "No," said the latter, as if answering a question from him, "not in the drawer of the writing desk that opens with a spring. It is not there, and it never will be there again." "Then you're a thief," said Slinkton. Without any change whatever in the inflexible purpose, which it was quite terrific even to me to contemplate, and from the power of which I had always felt convinced it was impossible for this wretch to escape, Beckwith returned. "And I am your niece's shadow, too." With an imprecation, Slinkton put his hand to his head, tore out some hair and flung it to the ground. It was the end of the smooth walk. He destroyed it in the action, and it will soon be seen that his use for it was past. Beckwith went on. "Whenever you left here, I left here. Although I understood that you found it necessary to pause in the completion of that purpose to avert suspicion, still I watched you close with the poor confiding girl. When I had a diary and could read it word by word, it was only about the night before your last visit to Scarborough. You remember that night? You slept with a small flat vial tied to your wrist. I sent to Mr. Sampson, who was kept out of view. This is Mr. Sampson's trusty servant standing by the door. We 3 saved your niece among us." Slinkton looked at us all, took an uncertain step or two from the place where he had stood, returned to it, and glanced about him in a very curious way, as one of the meaner reptiles might, looking for a hole to hide in. I noticed at the same time that a singular change took place in the figure of the man, as if it collapsed within his clothes, and it consequently became ill-shapen and ill-fitting. You shall know, said Beckwith, for I hope the knowledge will be bitter and terrible to you, why you have been pursued by one man, and why, when the whole interest that Mr. Sampson represents would have expended any money in hunting you down, you have been tracked to death at a single individual's charge. I hear you have had the name of Meltham on your lips sometimes. I saw, in addition to these other charges, a sudden stoppage come upon his breathing. When you sent the sweet girl whom you murdered, you know with what artfully made out surroundings and probabilities you sent her to Meltham's office before taking her abroad to originate the transaction that doomed her to her grave. It fell to Meltham's lot to see her and to speak with her. It did not fall to his lot to save her, though I know he would freely give his own life to have done it. He admired her. I would say he loved her deeply, if I thought it possible that you could understand the word. When she was sacrificed, he was thoroughly assured of your guilt. Having lost her, he had but one object left in life, and that was to avenge her and destroy you. I saw the villain's nostrils rise and fall convulsively, but I saw no moving at his mouth. That man Meltham, Beckwith steadily pursued, was as absolutely certain that you could never elude him in this world if he devoted himself to your destruction with his utmost fidelity and earnestness, and if he divided the sacred duty with no other duty in life, as he was certain that in achieving it he would be a poor instrument in the hands of Providence, and would do well before heaven in striking you out from among living men. I am that man, and I thank God that I have done my work. If Slinkton had been running for his life from swift-footed savages a dozen miles, he could not have shown more emphatic signs of being oppressed at heart and laboring for breath than he showed now, when he looked at the pursuer who had so relentlessly hunted him down. You never saw me under my right name before. You see me under my right name now. You shall see me once again in the body when you are tried for your life. You shall see me once again in the spirit, when the cord is around your neck, and the crowd are crying against you. When Meltham had spoken these last words, the miscreant suddenly turned away his face, and seemed to strike his mouth with his open hand. At the same instant, the room was filled with a new and powerful odor, and almost at the same instant he broke into a crooked run, leap, start, I have no name for the spasm, and fell, with a dull weight that shook the heavy old doors and windows in their frames. That was the fitting end of him. When we saw that he was dead, we drew away from the room, and Meltham, giving me his hand, said with a weary air, I have no more work on earth, my friend, but I shall see her again elsewhere. He might have saved her, he said. He had not saved her, and he reproached himself. He had lost her, and he was broken-hearted. The purpose that sustained me is over, Sampson, and there is nothing now to hold me to life. I am not fit for life. I am weak and spiritless. I have no hope and no object. My day is done. In truth, I could hardly have believed that the broken man who then spoke to me was the man who had so strongly and so differently impressed me when his purpose was before him. I used as such entreaties with him as I could, but he still said, had always said, in a patient, undemonstrative way, nothing could avail him. He was broken-hearted. He died early in the next spring. He was buried by the side of the poor young lady for whom he had cherished those tender and unhappy regrets, and he left all he had to her sister. She lived to be a happy wife and mother. She married my sister's son, who succeeded poor Meltham. She is living now, and her children ride about the garden on my walking stick when I go to see her. If you like that story, consider supporting me as a patron. That way you help me make more stories for you and get access to a patrons-only library of stories, lots more hours for you to listen to. So that was Hunted Down by Charles Dickens, published in 1859. Some sources have 1860. Now, I'm going to do the notes slightly differently. You may have heard that I'm working with a YouTube coach or to kind of improve my offer for people and make things more interesting for you. So I'm going to talk about the author, and I'm going to, Charles Dickens, I'm going to talk about this story, but I'm going to try and make it a little bit more interesting. As part of this, as an experiment, I've created a little PDF ebook that has the story in it and these notes. And if you like them, you can get them from my Ko-fi store. So that's www.kofi.com/Barcud, BARCUD. If you like them, you'll only know that till you get to the end of them. So anyway, Hunted Down. The epigraph. I have absolute confidence in my own observation. There is nothing truer than physiognomy, taken in connection with manner. So this is a big obsession of Dickens, actually, physiognomy. And it's a key thing. And we have, I think we have almost like Mr. Rayburn is being set up to be a sort of Sherlock Holmesian character. We can envisage, he's got the business, he's a life insurance, and there have been stories done like this, detective stories done like this, because life insurance fraud's a big deal, and the detectives completely devoted to that. So we could see him having a series of cases from his case books, if you like. So, but that I don't think that ever happened. Let us say, so what made Charles Dickens, Charles Dickens first? Let me get the ideas in order, because it is possible, of course, that some of you don't know who Charles Dickens was. So Charles Dickens was born on the 7th of February 1812 in Portsmouth, England. He spent his early childhood in Kent before his family moved to London in 1822. Dickens' father, John Dickens, was imprisoned for debt in 1824, forcing young Charles to leave school and work in a shoe blacking factory. This experience profoundly influenced his later writing, particularly his portrayal of child labor and social injustice. He lived it, you see. He was one of these kind of latte-sipping lifestyle leftists. He was there in the shoe blacking factory. He knew what it was all about. And one of the things I find in Dickens's work, it's imbued with a deep, deep compassion for ordinary people. We've already said that. So he went to Warren's, it was Warren's shoe blacking factory, and he worked for months doing 10-hour days, pasting labels on pots of boot polish, enduring squalid conditions and feeling deeply humiliated by his circumstances. This period, though brief, left an indelible mark on Dickens's psyche, we know that. And he has these impassioned social commentary, think of Oliver Twist, David Copperfield. The blacking factory experience became a recurrent motif in his fiction, most notably in David Copperfield, which contains strong autobiographical details. His childhood trauma, if you can call it that, just being dirt poor, it was traumatic, but that was the lot. That was what people expected. It wasn't in any way out of the way. He began his literary career as a journalist, reporting on parliamentary debates and writing sketches on London life. His first novel, The Pickwick Papers, was published in monthly installments from 1836 to 1837, launching his career as a fiction writer, massively successful. The Pickwick Papers, officially titled The Posthumous Papers of the Pickwick Club, was his first novel, as we know this. The episodic structure and observational style of the Pickwick Papers clearly reflected Dickens' background as a journalist. Very often with these stories he was paid by the word. His experience reporting on parliamentary debates and writing sketches of London life for various newspapers and magazines is evident in several aspects of the novel. And he went on, as you know, to write Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield, Jake, Great Expectations. And he was not only a prolific writer, as a note, but a social critic, and he died, and he was a great walker, and he was a great the public speaker, and he wore himself out on tours of the USA and the UK, going round speaking to audiences, which he was very good at, but I mean, he just burned the candle at both ends. And he died on 9th of June 1870, leaving his final novel, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, unfinished. Interesting, I've just done a story by Wilkie Collins, The Ghost and Mrs. Zant, which you can catch on the sister channel, the Classic Ghost Stories podcast. Some of the terms, because we're talking about a story that was written not quite 200 years ago, but not far short, and you may not be British, and we have preserved some of these things, but even to us, some of them are different, now. So physiognomy is a big part of this story, of course. The Victorians believed the science of reading character from facial features, and it was a Victorian version of profiling, done more based on facial features and behavior as well. And he was a big believer in physiognomy, and he would spend hours studying faces in London crowds. Now, life assurance, not insurance, a financial arrangement like ours where people insured their lives, often for substantial sums, and he became notorious for murder schemes leading to strict new laws. And the first life assurance murder case in England led to the creation of the insurable interest law, so that you couldn't, to try and subvent, if that's a word, this basically assuring people you didn't know, and in murdering them, for the profit. Damn that, and right, I'm laughing. Chambers, so the chambers, a set of rooms usually for single gentlemen, modern equivalent to small apartment or office. The term survived in modern legal offices, where lawyers still call their offices chambers, and of course there are the Inns of Court in London, where the barristers go to train and work from, and they have chambers, and barristers particularly have chambers. So consumption was... It's also called phthisis in Edgar Allan Poe, hard to say on that one. It's tuberculosis, massive killer. It was often used as a cover story for poison victims, and it was responsible for 1 in 4 deaths in Victorian England. My great aunt, Madge, died of tuberculosis in 1926, and then, of course, what stopped it was the inoculations, and also antibiotics. It's having a little bit of a resurgence at the moment. The Guardian, in case you didn't know, the legal overseer of orphan children and their fortune, and it does exist still. We still have guardians, but it gives him a lot of power in Slinkton's case over his nieces. A clerk, or clerk, as you might say, depending where you come from, more prestigious than today, often an educated professional position, something between an executive assistant and junior manager. So one of the things that struck me in the story was how this guy goes in and he says, I wonder if a policy's come in, and they whip it out and they show it to him and they give it to him. Now, of course, you wouldn't get that with client confidant. You'd have to prove... To do anything these days, you have to prove your identity with 17 different types of document, even if you want to just buy a latte. Maybe not just a latte, but I got a new phone contract, and I had to prove my existence, who I was, and that I wasn't money laundering, and what? Anyway, never mind. Brandy and water was a common Victorian drink. One of the actual things that struck me was, did they really boil the brandy? I don't know that. Weird. So a shadow, of course, you can guess what that is in if you don't know. It's a surveillance operative. Ready money, cash on hand, particulars. So details are specifics, really. That's what that means. Let's say something about social codes, in case you didn't know. This comes up a lot in the Victorian stories I read. So calling card etiquette. Leaving a card meant different things depending on how it was folded. The corner turned down meant it was delivered in person. Full card was flat, sent by a servant. So Slinkton's careful attention to social niceties masks his true nature. That's really important. And the forms of address in Victorian London. Mr. used for men of business or professional standing. A squire, more formal, implied higher social status. So we get this word, the squire, who is the kind of local, often not a formal landowner, but the guy who lived in the manor house in the village or small town. If you weren't given a title, you were just a walker, then that was That's because you were common. So let's think about the foreshadowing in this story, because I think it's well done. That he sets it out and he flags these things up. So the too perfect hair parting. This is very Dickensian. How he, Dickens is. I think there are at least two parts that spring to mind there. Very Dickensian. Although the rest of the story could be written by maybe Wilkie Collins, maybe another Victorian detective guy or girl. But so how he personifies the parting, it talks to him. That's so Dickens. And then Beckwith, when he's doing his drunken stuff about boiling the brandy, that comic caricature that he does so much in Pickwick Papers and in fact all his novels. That's so very Dickens anyway. So this too perfect. You'd always be suspicious of people who are too perfect. So he immediately dislikes his extraordinarily straight hair parting. It suggests an artificiality, doesn't it? The practiced smile described with the words as elaborate and ready-made, tipping us off that this is a ruse, you know. And when Dickens repeatedly mentions a physical detail, it's not accidental. So clues in the conversation. His casual inquiry about Meltham, and it was so subtly done. I didn't get it when I first read it. I don't know if you did. It would just appear just like it could have been anything, but it was there. That is the great art of foreshadowing, to foreshadow so subtly that your readers don't pick up on it in advance, but when the key information is revealed to them, they go, aha. And I've said this many times, if you don't do that, you get the Deus Ex Machina business whereby they go, you what? You what? You know, if you reveal a key piece of information that turns on something you haven't told them, then they're like, that's a cheat, and they're very upset. But if it is there, but they didn't, and if it's there and it's too obvious, they're like, oh yeah, saw that coming. But so the key trick is to just get it right, like Dickens did with Meltham, I think. You don't do it too heavily, but you don't do it too subtly. Okay, so also conversation clues. He knows an awful lot about life assurance policies, doesn't he? That makes you think, And then his excessive praises of his niece's beauty and health, and also portraying himself as this ever so nice guy, these terrible things. He's too... There's something in the... I don't know if this is a British character, and I think there is a difference, but we don't like too much show of affection. Or we're very like, I think this is a Germanic thing. The Germans, the Danes, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Dutch, they're all similar, you know. You don't show, you're not too effusive and gushing, whereas kind of more Southern European and also more Celtic people, the Irish and the Welsh, are seen as, and the French, the Spanish, are seen by the Germanics as being a bit too gushing and a bit too, and you don't trust people who are too effusive, so are too excessive, you know. Slinkton always steers the conversations towards death and money, if you notice. So first of all, the convenient deaths. So the first, Miss Nina, the just young lass there, suspiciously vague circumstances. Then her sister is on the way to death, even to the extent she admits it herself, oh, I don't think my life's going to be very long. Yeah, it might be coincidence, but it probably ain't. And then this mysterious shadow. And then Rayburn jokes about the show. This one. No, not that one. This one. And then there's this old man who seems to be like a guardian angel to her. And he is a guardian angel and he's not an old man. So, pay attention to the characters' reactions. They often reveal more than words. So Slinkton, it has an extreme reaction to hearing about it. Margaret Nina is like, Miss Nina is, well, you know, it's no big deal. But Rayburn, he has a certain attention and interest in that. He even goes and speaks to the fella and comes back, and I want to say something about mystery and misdirection. So so the misdirection that Slinkton does, he's too perfect. He has excessive interest in other people's business. He's two perfect testimonials, the convenient deaths of just after life assurance policies, and his insistence on appearing charitable and concerned. He takes a special care to be the especially nice bloke, doesn't he? In a sense, that serves two purposes. It makes us, it triggers this, yeah, it's too good to be true idea, but also we think, well, maybe he's a nice guy, and in fact, Rayburn. What happens is that Rayburn hates him just because of these things that he's noticed has got no rational explanation for it. And then he kind of observes him being ever so nice, and he thinks, oh, maybe maybe I'm a bit over the top hating him because of his hair, his parting in his hair. And then a bit later, the next thing, no, he really hates him. And so I was going to say something about the balance of information. So Dickens withholds the information. Sherlock Holmes does this as well, or Conan Doyle does this with Sherlock Holmes. And it is a sort of a thing that later developed was this idea in detective novels that the reader should be able to solve it. I don't think many detective writers actually play fair with that, and I think it's really difficult for the reader to solve it because be honest, the reader doesn't want to solve it. They want to get to the end and go, well, I didn't see that coming, and then see it in retrospect. That's the important thing. If you didn't see it coming because it was a Deus Ex machine, it just dropped from nowhere, then you're like, yes, that's a swizz. But if you then can see in retrospect, oh yeah, right, okay, yeah, that's what you want. So if you're writing a detective novel, that's what you need to achieve. So Dickens, Rayburn knows loads of stuff, and he doesn't tell us. This is what Sherlock Holmes does. This creates mysteries. A guy called Robert McKee wrote a book called Story, and he talks about the key importance of balancing information between what the different people know in a story. So, and I've said this many times, but it's really important, particularly in this story. So to create mystery, the protagonist knows things, like Rayburn, like Sherlock Holmes, and they don't tell you. And you find at the end, and that's mysterious, isn't it? Why is he going to talk to this guy? Who is this shadow? And he's talking about the vigorous character who's helping her. So why does she suddenly go off with these people without any protest? That's mysterious. And who is this vigorous? And he says, I know in his hands, I can't remember the exact quote, she would come to no harm because it's his trusty, tough guy servant who appears at the end, the muscle. That reminds me of an anecdote. Once I went round somebody's house. We were going to section because of their mental health, and we didn't in the end. But I was there, and there was a couple of doctors and a social worker. So he went, so this guy, he was singing, who are you? And fair play to him, right, Who are you? I'm Dr. So-and-so. Yeah. Who are you? I'm Dr. So-and-so. It says the social worker, who are you? I'm the social worker. He looks at me and he goes, I guess you're the muscle, and that made me laugh because I'm not the muscle. But this man, Rayburn's assistant, is the muscle, all right? So, and then we have the misdirection is great in this, so there's all sorts of stuff going on. So as I've said, the balance of information, he creates mystery. We don't know these things. Sometimes, anyway, I won't go into the other balances because I've talked about them elsewhere. So that Beckwith, we don't, Tita, you suspect that? Two things I didn't see coming. I knew there was something going on with, and this is a very classic Victorian thing, the precarious nature or situation of women in Victorian society. They require a male protector. And in Victorian society, don't shoot the messenger. This is what they thought. And you can see how difficult it is for this young woman without a protector. And she gets one, in the end, another man. She's not a girl boss, and they didn't have those in those days. But yeah, so it's very precarious. That's one thing to say. The other thing to say is the things I didn't get were I didn't really get Melfin. It was mentioned. I thought, oh yeah, okay, yeah. That's a shame. I didn't get it. And then he drops the irony. It's right there for us. Oh, yeah, well, he's half broken. Oh, the girl died. There it is. That's the clue. If only if he was too clever for us to lead us to that. And that's his skill. He's a great writer. Dickens is a great writer. It's probably one of the best writers technically, in many other ways as well, but certainly a very good technical writer, craft writer. So, and the other one is Beckwith. Did you suss that Beckwith was Meltham? No, I didn't. But yeah, it all falls into place. There's another very Victorian thing there about going to a better place, isn't there? Going to a better place, which is death. You know, that was very, very Victorian. So, his greatest trick in this story, making readers focus on Slinkton's obvious villainy while hiding the true game of cat and mouse being played. We think we're watching a predator hunt his prey, and actually we're watching the predator being hunted. It's good, isn't it? Now, in this little PDF I've produced, I've just there's a little bit about Victorian physiognomy. What to look out for if you want to become an expert like Rayburn in physiognomy. What you should be looking out for to tip you off and how it linked to this story. So anyway, I hope you thought that was fun. I've just tried to lighten it a little bit. Let me know. And if you want to go over to Ko-fi, I'm going to sell you, I'm afraid. Man's going to make a living. At a very modest price, I think I'll put what you want to pay. So you pay me what you want. I think you put a pay $1 is the cheapest. But anyway, if you don't want it, you don't want it, do you? You might have enough now. Anyway, hope you like Darts. I thought he's a great writer. Really enjoyed reading it. I'll speak to you again soon.